first, let me introduce myself. My name is Emily Bagwell. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I live in Atlanta, Georgia. I am the resource manager for Reconciling Ministries Network, and a part of my job, I get to work with the extension ministries that are a part of our movement, and one of those is the Parents Reconciling Network. You're going to learn a little bit more about Parents Reconciling Network today, and we are excited to have a wonderful speaker and facilitator for today's conversation. And I just want to, as we get started, share with you a couple of kind of ground rules for our time together and some rhythms and practices that we have been in as a part of these virtual porches. First, I just want to say that we hope for you to participate as much as you are interested and willing to do. Meaning, if you come with a question that's just been on your heart or on your mind, we would love to know what you're thinking about, what questions you're having. One of the roles of this group is to be a support to one another. It was started decades ago by a group of caring parents who are wanting to learn together to support their LGBTQ plus children, and it has grown and evolved in a number of beautiful ways throughout its time. What you are experiencing today is a virtual porch. This is an opportunity that we started during our COVID days as an opportunity to continue to meet together. So we created these 1 hour learning sessions where we have addressed a number of topics and questions and hosted just really dynamic speakers so that we could continue to learn together, which is another important part of what this group does. We support each other, we learn together because we know that we're all on a journey. There is growth and evolution that happens within all of us. There are new questions we have. There's new terminology to know. There are ways for us to continue to be better allies and advocates and support and loved ones to our loved ones. And so that is one thing that we do. And that's the kind of the core of what these virtual porch sessions are meant to do. So again, we would love to hear from you. If there are questions that you have or that you would love to learn about, we have a team of Parents Reconciling Network board members who work to plan these virtual porches, and we constantly are asking what do we need to talk about, what are people thinking about what's going on in local communities, what's happening with families, how can we learn and support each other. The other major part of what Parents Reconciling Network does is advocate. We learn to be better allies and to be advocates for our kids. And we know and acknowledge that for some of you, that means that you have kids living in your house, and for other you have grown kids that have moved on or in a different independent space, but still you are their parent or you are their loved ones. I'm thankful that while this is a Parents Reconciling Network, it doesn't mean that it has to be your biological kid that you're connected to. You may be here because you are a pastor or a youth pastor or an aunt, uncle, grandparent, any of those and many more, that you care about how to support and love your LGBTQ plus people in your life more gently, more with greater affirmation, with different language. And so thank you for whatever reason, for whoever brought you into this space. We hope that it will be a time of nurturing and of learning. And again, I'm going to say this probably a couple more times. If there are things on your mind, please let us know. We are starting a couple of new things as we head into this next iteration of who we are as a network. One of those is that we would like to send out more regular communications to the people who want to know about Parents Reconciling Network. What we have continued to learn is that there are people who do not know that this even exists or that this is something that is available to them. So we rely on you all, this is a grassroots movement, to help people know that this is an option and an opportunity for learning and growth for folks. So that means if there's a way for you to share it with your local community, whether or not you're involved in a support group or a PFLAG, or if you have church communications that would be willing to put this kind of information in, we'd love to give you information to put out there for folks. We do have these virtual porch calls monthly, except for during the summer months. So this is our kickoff for the fall. We'll have 4 sessions this fall semester. And then again, we'll continue on through next May. So a lot of opportunities for learning and growth. because of this new iteration, we would like to start a new email list. We don't have a current up-to-date email list just for Parents Reconciling Network. You may get RMN, Reconciling Ministries, emails, and that is wonderful. But PRN is going to be focused in some specific ways that will hopefully be pertinent to you and your loved ones in a more detailed way. We can share specific information. So in just a minute, I can't multitask. So in just a second, I'm going to put a link. If you would like to sign up to be added to this email list, there'll be a form for you to fill out so that we can get that started. And those are just going to be quarterly emails that go out, again, with resources, upcoming events, details of different ways that you can be involved in the work of Parents Reconciling Network. A couple of ground rules for our time together today. As I said, we'd love it to be interactive. So if you have a question or something that you would like to comment, please utilize that chat function. If you feel comfortable sharing it with the whole group, you can just do that in a regular group chat. If you would like me to raise it as a comment anonymously, you can just send it directly to me, and I hope to incorporate it into our conversation and time of learning today. We will ask you to stay on mute while our speaker is presenting, just so that we can hear and listen attentively, and there will be a time of some Q&A. Let me tell you a little bit about how we have the virtual porch planning team wanted to frame this fall learning time. As I think that probably I don't use the word all a whole lot. There are appropriate times to use it. I think I can say confidently that we're all aware of the tensions that live in our world today, particularly at this moment in time, on a number of different issues and topics, just realities of what life is about. And we feel that with you. We sit in those places of tension, and we know that as God's people, we are called to be people of hope and love. And so we wanted to spend some time this fall, as we are looking at these virtual porches, kind of holding those in the space of asking one another, where's the hope? Where's the joy? And I think if we went around right now, hopefully all of us would have some kind of response to that. But I want you to know that that's kind of what is holding our time and our space this fall, because we believe that there is hope and there is joy for us to all experience together. And we're going to be tapping into much of that in different ways as we have different topics and speakers during this fall virtual porch series. So again, I want to say thank you for taking the time to join us in conversation. We really appreciate you wanting to learn and to grow together. And I am absolutely thrilled to introduce our facilitator and speaker today. She is a board member of the Reconciling Ministry Network, and is a parent who has an LGBTQ plus child. I will let her more fully introduce herself, but she is just a passionate advocate, a teacher, a preacher, a mother, and so many more things. And we are just overjoyed to have Rachel Cornwell lead us and join us and speak with us today. So Rachel, thank you so much for being here. We are very, very grateful for you taking the time to just come and share your heart and your passion. And I'll let you take it away and give more formal introductions of yourself. But thanks for leading us in this time together today.
Thank you, Emily. Nothing about today is going to be formal, but so I'm grateful to Emily for the invitation, for asking me to be here. Those of you who know Emily Bagwell will know that when she asks, I never say no to Emily, because she works so hard. She is so dedicated. And she is an inspiration to me too. And so I'm glad to be here with y'all, and glad to see some familiar faces. Some of my beautiful church people are here, some of my neighbors and friends from the Baltimore Washington Conference. It's great to be with y'all today. So Emily invited me to speak today on where I see hope right now. And as a pastor in the United Methodist Church, as a person living in the world, as a parent of a trans kid. I pastor Dumbarton United Methodist Church, which is in Georgetown, one of the longest continuous worshiping Methodist churches in the country. And we've been a reconciling congregation for almost 40 years. And so I get a lot of hope from my congregation and from the people who have been in this work for so long, well before me and alongside me. And so I'm grateful for that. And I live in Montgomery County, Maryland, which is it's a beautiful place to live. It's a progressive community. My son he came out as trans when he was in first grade, and he's now in eighth grade. And while middle school is no fun for anybody, he's doing really well. And he's thriving, and he feels really supported by his church, by his school, by his community, by his family and friends, of course. So as a parent, I know that I have a lot of privilege living where we live and being in the community we're in, and the church that we're in, but I also have a lot of hope because of that, because of the way I've seen my kiddo thrive. And I wanted to celebrate, how far we've come in this movement, and as parents, as people who have been living, not just as allies on this call, but I know people, LGBTQ folks who've been living as their full authentic selves for a really long time and leading the way. So I get a lot of hope from being with you all today. I have some slides I'm going to share here, so let me attempt that. I'm not going to let you see all of my messy screen. But I loved this title that Emily suggested, which was As Brave as Them. So as parents of LGBTQ kids, we get a lot of hope from our kids, right? And from the way that they are living out in the world as their full authentic selves. And so really, I want to just talk today, and I want this to be a dialogue. So please feel free to put questions in the chat, and there'll be time for us to talk too about what is giving us hope right now. So I want to start with a high note, which is that in 2023, GLAAD issued a report called Accelerating Acceptance, and found that universally non-LGBTQ Americans overwhelmingly agree that LGBTQ people should be free to live their lives and not be discriminated against. 96% of Americans think that schools should be a safe and accepting place for all youth. 91% of non-LGBTQ Americans think that LGBTQ people should have the freedom to live their life and not be discriminated against. And 84% support equal rights. Now, this might seem like a really low bar, like equal rights, safe schools, but we know that these are not things to take for granted. This is because there's been a lot of hard work done in terms of visibility and acceptance and education and advocacy to help people understand the need for safe and affirming spaces for LGBTQ people, and the right that all people have to live as their full selves. So, we're in a good place overall and overwhelmingly. I wanted to say that. And at the same time, right, it feels like a really hard and scary time to be an openly queer person in this country. We hear all the time about book bans, don't say gay laws, wars on drag queens and drag story hours, bathroom bans, all kinds of things that are particularly targeting the trans community, but LGBTQ people more broadly. And it feels like an undermining of the work that has been done, the progress that has been made. And if we pay too much attention to the news or to social media, we can go down very quickly down these rabbit holes of feeling very depressed, discouraged, fearful for our kids and the people that we love. Another reason for that fear and anxiety is that this is real, right? Like legislators on the state level in particular are really trying to roll back rights of LGBTQ people. Um, this is a map. This is from the ACLU of states where anti-LGBTQ legislation has been introduced at the state level this year, 530 bills. Now, of course, many of them will not become law. Some of them, even if they become law, have been challenged in court and have been overturned. But still, this targeting, this singling out of LGBTQ people and their rights, it feels very personal to me, and it may feel personal to you as well. And I look at places where, you know, you see in DC, there's zero bills, right? But there are a lot of places where there are many, many bills and attacks on trans people in particular. Chase Strangio, who's the Deputy Director of Transgender Justice at ACLU, says that over the past 6 years, state legislatures have prioritized an attack, particularly on trans youth. Most of these bills are targeting trans girls in sports and banning gender affirming healthcare for trans youth. And the underlying goal, of course, is to entrench into law this discrimination and to limit self-determination for youth and to prevent people from being trans at all. And there's a very well-funded effort and infrastructure and misinformation that is behind all of this. And we know that there is a mental health crisis in this country that disproportionately affects LGBTQ people. Thank God, being LGBTQ is no longer considered to be a mental illness, but queer people struggle with their mental health and accessing mental health. One study found that although LGBTQ people have a higher rate of mental health crises and concerns, they let me see if I can get the statistic right. They are accessing mental health services at a 2.5 times higher rate than their heterosexual counterparts, but particularly in communities that are marginalized, not just because of their sexuality or gender identity, but BIPOC communities, the disability community, and people who have a low socioeconomic status. These barriers to access, in addition to being LGBTQ, make it very difficult for people to access the care that they need. And we all know the statistics too about LGBTQ youth having much higher rates of attempted suicide. 41%, according to the Trevor Project, of youth seriously considered attempting suicide in the past year, including half of transgender and non-binary youth, compared to 30% of cisgender youth. So that's just a shockingly high statistic. And incredibly worrisome for people who love these kids. So we know that there's reasons to worry and to be afraid, but there's also reasons to hope. And so I just wanted to share some things that are giving me hope, and then for us to talk about what's helping us to feel hopeful right now. And the first is just the increase in family acceptance. We are all here because we know how important it is for LGBTQ people to have acceptance, affirmation by their families. And according to the Trevor Project again, nearly 2/3 of US adults said that they would be comfortable if their child came out as LGBTQ. 72% of all adults said they are confident that they would be able to understand and support their child if they came out as trans or non-binary. 72%. That's huge. I mean, when my son came out as trans, we had never thought about the possibility of our kid being transgender. My husband and I had talked about the fact that one of our kids might be gay, and we were fine with that. But as heterosexual cisgender people, it just didn't occur to us that our kid might be transgender. And when he came out to us, we wanted to be accepting. We didn't exactly know how. And so that was really the journey for us, was to find community, to find resources, and to learn how to be the best supportive parents we could be to him. So things are changing, and we know that these kids who have accepting families, accepting communities, even just one accepting adult in their life, have much better outcomes in terms of their mental health, their well-being, feeling safe in the world. And so this is a trend that's moving in a positive direction, because people are starting to understand more. I found this map really hopeful. This is from the LGBTQ Family Acceptance Organization, which is a great resource online for anybody looking to find local resources or to connect to resources online. And it shows where across the country there are places to access counseling, medical care, community. And we see that there are huge parts of this country where, people are pretty far from resources, but we also see, like, I mean, just look at the rainbows, right? There is an increasing number of resources, communities, hospitals, clinics, clinicians, not to mention reconciling churches, right? Where people can find community and support. And I feel like this is also something that's growing and something to celebrate and feel good about. The second reason that I feel really hopeful is just because of increased representation and visibility. These are just some of the LGBTQ folks who are legislators, are, in the cabinet of the current administration, who are celebrities, who are athletes, and are visible and are known. Can you name some of these people? Who do you see on the screen?
Megan Rapone,
Yeah, Megan Rapinoe, right?
yeah, and
Olympic soccer player.
yeah, Janelle Monáe, I think.
Yep, Janelle Monáe, actress,
Emmett.
musician.
Buttigieg. I don't know if I could pronounce it correct. Buttigieg.
Oh, Pete Buttigieg, yeah.
Mhm.
Former candidate for president, the Secretary of Transportation.
So I know one of them is an actor, trans actor, was I can't think of his name.
This is Billy Porter.
I wasn't thinking of him, but Emmett. I think he goes by Emmett now.
Oh yes, Elliot Page.
Elliot. Okay.
Yeah,
my memory is not that good, and I know that's the trans child of a couple.
Dwayne Wade and Gabrielle
Wade.
Union.
Right.
Dwayne Wade was an NBA basketball player, and that's his trans daughter, Zaya. This is Chapel Roan. Anybody heard a Chapel Roan song this summer? You've been living under a rock. No. She's like the it girl of the summer and an out lesbian. This is Sarah McBride. She's running for the Senate in Delaware and is a state legislator and is a trans woman. So, I mean, these are just a few, right? And like, we can think of others. And again, according to the Trevor Project, most LGBTQ people, kids, 65% reported knowing at least one older LGBTQ person that they would consider a role model or somebody that they would look up to. That's huge, right? Like, just for LGBTQ people to see themselves reflected in the world as someone who is successful and thriving and happy and can do anything. And so they don't see being queer as a barrier. They see that they can be queer and they can, do anything, right? Without being held back, and being queer is just part of who they are. So to me, this gives me a lot of hope. Again, when my son first started exploring his gender identity, he's an athlete. And so I looked for athletes that were trans, because I knew that, it's not as much of an issue for kids who are assigned female at birth who transition to male, but for non-binary kids and youth, and for kids that are assigned male at birth and transition to female, there's just it seems like there's such a barrier to participating in sports. But I found, some trans athletes to say, look, you love sports. This doesn't mean that you can't be an athlete and pursue your dreams. I want to highlight that we do have increased legal protection at the federal level in particular. So the Equal Opportunity Commission banned workplace discrimination based on a really key Supreme Court decision in 2020, Bostock versus Clayton County, Georgia. This also was the basis of a federal Fair Housing Act, which bans discrimination for housing. So I think that it's like most landlords and employers with more than 15 employees cannot discriminate against people for being LGBTQ by law. I mean, that doesn't mean it doesn't happen, but there is legal precedent to protect people's rights. As of June 2021, you no longer need to show medical documentation to establish or update your gender designation on your US passport. You just need to fill out an application and check the box that is appropriate for you, including X if you're non-binary. And so when my kid got his passport updated, we hadn't updated any other documents, although we're in the process of doing that now. But he was able to get a passport that said male. And so it was more consistent with his photo and the way he presents himself, and traveling became a lot easier for us. This year, there is going to be a Supreme Court case, a really key one, based on the Tennessee law forbidding or prohibiting minors from accessing gender-affirming hormones. And so the Supreme Court has agreed to hear a case that is challenging. It's listed as U.S. versus Skirmetti. And the question is whether Tennessee's law that bans gender-affirming hormone therapies for minors violates the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution. And in 2023, a federal judge overturned the first state law in Arkansas, where I'm from, and I know there's somebody else here from Arkansas, that was banning youth getting gender-affirming health care based on the Equal Protection Clause, and because it said that it violated the First Amendment rights or due process of parents and medical providers. And I actually got to be in Arkansas, in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where I grew up, for Pride in June of 2023. And the 4 youth and their parents who had brought this lawsuit with the help of the ACLU and got this ban overturned were the grand marshals of the Pride Parade. And I know some of y'all are from the South, and I tell everybody, go to Pride in the South, because if you want to see where the resistance is happening and you want to see real joy, it was very, very hopeful. Like I absolutely cried and got goosebumps at people just insisting on dignity and respect and visibility and pride, even in places where it seems harder than where I live currently. And it was a real community experience. To quote Chase Strangio again, I mean, he says that the things that we need to do to keep pushing around legislation, both at the state and federal level, is that we need to stay informed. We need to inform other people. We need to engage our lawmakers. We have to donate resources, and we need to affirm the people closest to us. And so I think there are things that we can do, even in the face of these sort of legal threats. And not to diminish the changes that are happening in the church, right? In 2023, Reconciling Ministries had 81 new Reconciling Ministries that joined the network, 970 new individual RUMs across the country and the world. So this is really exciting. Our movement is growing. That was leading up to, of course, the postponed General Conference, which happened in April of this year. And where all of the bans on queer clergy, on same-gender marriage, on spending money in the church on ministries to support LGBTQ people, these were lifted. And there were some big feelings, right? Because this was it was a wonderful thing that happened, and people had been fighting for this for a long time, and a lot of people were harmed along the way. So I know in my congregation, we were really trying to hold all of that, right? Hold the relief, and the joy, and also the grief and the pain and of this big moment in the church. And, you know, I wrote a book in 2023 called Gender Diverse, Daring Adventures, Helping Gender Diverse Kids and Their Families Thrive. And because of that, I've had the opportunity to go and visit a lot of churches, mostly near me, but virtually kind of around the country, and just having those conversations with church people who really want to understand how can we support and welcome LGBTQ people, and particularly trans and non-binary kids and their families. What do we need to do what do we need to be thinking about and affirming? And it's been very heartening to me to see the change in the church, both at a general level and then at a grassroots level. And I'm excited because at Dumbarton, Barbara, who's on the call today, she and I are going to start a support group for families of gender diverse kids, using a resource that Parents Reconciling Network put together, a toolkit for how to start a support group. So there's more work to be done, because just repealing those bans and prohibitions and the harmful language doesn't make our church a welcoming place overnight, right? The movement of Reconciling Ministries is, I would say, even more critical now, right? Like, we did the big advocacy and we changed the policies, but we know that policies changes don't always change hearts and minds. And so we need to keep at it and keep resourcing our churches, keep supporting Reconciling Ministries, and keep doing the work in our local congregations and annual conferences. And finally, I just, the kids are all right. That is that's my mantra. According to a couple of studies, a Gallup poll that came out this year and a PRRI study that came out in January, the number of people in the United States who identify as LGBTQ is 7.6%. You know, it used to say that it was much lower. And a lot of that has to do with Gen Z. According to these same polls, Gen Z, the kids who are now ages 18 to 26, so my oldest daughter is Gen Z, they identify as LGBTQ, 28% of them, almost a third, right? So, and a lot of them are, don't even feel the need to put a label on their identity or their sexuality, right? They're much more comfortable with this sense of fluidity, and just expressing themselves in gender diverse ways, and open to the idea that they might fall in love with somebody that's, you know, trans or non-binary, and don't necessarily feel the need to label themselves or their relationships. And so I think these kids are really changing what it means to be LGBTQ, and changing the landscape overall, and changing acceptance. This Gallup poll said that 1 in 10 millennials and 1 in 5 Gen Z adults identify as LGBTQ. And if these current trends continue, it's likely that the proportion of LGBTQ identifiers in the US will exceed 10% within the next 3 decades. So that's a lot. That's a lot more people, which means a lot more people know somebody personally who identifies as queer. They love somebody who identifies as queer, and I think that is really going to change things. And I just want to end with one story, which is so that my son, who is in 8th grade now, just turned 13, is not really out at school. And he just says, look, I'm just a boy. I'm not a trans boy. I'm not a boy with an asterisk. I'm just a boy. And I want to be treated and seen as that. I don't want to go to the GSA club, even though we have one, the Gender Sexuality Alliance. I don't want to go to pride parades. Like you can do that, mom. That's your job. But my job is just to be me, which I fully support. But he, because he did transition in 1st grade, and there are kids who he still goes to school with who remember that, or their parents remember that. Last year, he was getting some kids coming up to him and asking him, "Are you trans?" And he was really upset by this, understandably. It wasn't really something that he wanted to talk about. And so we spent some time figuring out how to help him navigate that. And he said, I don't want to come out. I don't want to come out to people. My close friends know, but I don't want to talk about it with everybody, which is totally his right. And I told him, I said, one thing you might consider, though, is when somebody asks you if you're trans, you might say, yeah, so what? Because then, they in middle school, they think they've got cachet because they've got some secret and they got some information on you. And, if you just say, yeah, and it's not a big deal, who cares? Then that disarms that person. And he said, no way, mom, I can't do that. Like, kids will bully me. And so I said, okay, I'm going to support you no matter what. You handle it the way you think you need to handle it. And then about a month later, he told me that he tried it. A kid came up to him at lunch and asked him if he was trans, and he said, yeah, so what? And this was a kid that he had known to have made homophobic remarks before. And the kid went, oh, okay, and walked away. And that was it. End of conversation. And my son just came home so much more confident and comfortable, and like, I can do this. I can stand up for myself. I can bring all of who I am. It doesn't have to be the thing that everybody knows about me, but if someone finds out that I'm trans, it's not going to be this big secret that I have to hide. And I can still be accepted and have friends and, do all the things I want to do at school. And I was just really grateful because the school has created this kind of environment where bullying is really not tolerated. And my son learned how to stand up for himself, and he's doing great. So I think the kids are all right. And that gives me a lot of hope. So I want to stop sharing and just open it up to hear from you about what you can say, what you're worried about, what's giving you anxiety right now. And you could also say what is giving you hope.
With that invitation, you are welcome to come off a mute and just speak, or you can use the chat. Adam,
Hi,
go
everyone. My
for
name
it.
is
You're
Adam.
unmuted. Go.
Can you hear me? Okay, good. Sometimes my microphone doesn't work, so today's a good day. Um, I'm new to the United Methodist Church as an adult. I transferred over, switched denominations just recently, within the last year. My daughter is 19 years old and just started college. She's trans, and has made a fantastic start to college life and her first year of college. So we're just so excited about that. She came out 3 years ago, or 3.5 years ago, and then finished the last 2 years of high school out. And we were very nervous about how things were going to go for her, but we knew it was the right move for her, because of her own mental health needs and so on. And she's flourished. So there's just a lot to be joyful, and she's going to a school, and has a community there that is very, very supportive and has a strong community, queer community. and support with the staff and so on. So we're really just super happy that she's in the place that
Mm.
she is. And even with all of that, there's still challenges that she still has, her anxious days and down days and things like that, and so on. And anyway, I wanted to go first because I have to leave for my other job in about 20 minutes. Um, but I would say like one of the things that I dealt with was like at first was like, oh, okay. We were very accepting right off the bat when she came out. Um, but I was like, okay, so how do you want to do the transition process? She's like, I want to get all the information about it. And I said, cool. But then I'm like, found myself hoping like, okay, let's really get this rolling. Let's go ahead and get started on the hormonal therapy and stuff like that.
Mm.
And I didn't share any of that with her, but I was like observing it in myself, and I was thinking to myself, I think the reason why is because I want her to be outwardly, I want her to be safe in the world.
Mm.
And so the less that people can kind of wonder or ask questions, the safer she would be, And she
Mm.
wasn't ready for any of this. She's on her own speed for how transitioning is going and everything, and she still is, which we totally support 100%.
Mm.
And we haven't applied any of that pressure, but I've had to manage that kind of anxiety for me. And so that's been an interesting journey, but it's been a really good journey too. So
Mm. Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm so grateful that your daughter's doing well and is happy and thriving in college. That transition from high school to college is such a huge life change, right? And comes with so much anxiety anyway. But to find her people and to be supported. And I think, the more we can tell these stories about our kids thriving in the world, when my kid first came out, like all I could think about was Matthew Shepard, right? Or the movie Boys Don't Cry, which my husband and I saw on our second date. Very romantic. But like these horror stories, right, of trans people being brutalized and murdered, and it still happens, right? Horrible things happen in the world. But like I think we also have to tell the stories of people who are thriving and being safe and being affirmed, because those are the majority of the stories. Yeah, thank you, Adam.
This is Barbara. I'd be glad to share if I don't want to interrupt anybody else though.
Go
Please,
ahead.
go
And
ahead.
Eric had his hand up, so after you, we'll hear from Eric. Go ahead, Barbara.
I just want to jump on the hope train too. So I think it's really important. And apologies, I am not able to be on camera. So still have purple hair. It's just longer, folks. But I'm I'm really grateful that Rachel chose to talk about hope. Full disclosure, she's my pastor. She's also my friend. She also interviewed my husband and my son and I for the book. And so we straddle worlds of family acceptance and family. I wouldn't say it's just kind of they avoid us. And so there's a lot of grieving that I think is important to talk about. Every parent goes through a different journey, and it can come up in unexpected ways. Senior year in high school was hard, when everybody was sharing pictures of their children when they were little, and we didn't really want to do that. But I don't like to dwell on that too much because I have a really happy, healthy, mentally strong freshman in college who's made so many friends. And so that's the hope that I wanted to share today is um, I live in a very diverse area of Northern Virginia. And before my child started high school, I asked for time with the principal over the summer and said, I have a non binary student. And I just need to know how this school is really going to operationalize its safe and supportive mission. So I do want to encourage people to do that, because our school really put those words into practice. And I will tell you that we were invited back, Adam and I, my son and I, to speak to the entire faculty at their back to school week about how the school created a safe and supportive environment for Adam, who pursued the IB diploma, who took as many advanced courses as he could, and just is really doing well as a freshman in college. And so, like Rachel's son, Adam wanted to go into college just as Adam, college freshman guy. And I think that's a really important thing that we as parents, you know, they are the ones who get to tell their story when and how. It's not my story, it's Adam's story. And I'm just here to listen and learn and be supportive. And so this Gen Z, God, I love them. I really do. Adam's roommate is queer. Adam's roommate's best friend is trans. Adam has been welcomed into this amazingly wonderful community of 18, 19-year-olds, all of whom conspired to help me get a birthday party for Adam on September 9th, a surprise one. And so there's a lot of joy in my life right now. The worry, the anxiety, fear doesn't really ever go away, but it's much less than it was when we started this journey, and I had so much more uncertainty. Gen Z is ready for our kids, and we just need to get on the Gen Z bus. So that's all I wanted to say.
And watching Barbara, you and your husband support Adam through all the different evolutions of their identity, right? And it's been a long journey, but it's been a real inspiration to me to see how you just held all of that so with so much love and so loosely, even though it was like, oh, now we're doing this, now we're doing this. You've really been there for him. So kudos to you.
Let's let Eric go, and then who's actually our PRN co-board chair with Roxana sitting next to him. And then Audrey Myers, who is our vice chair for PRN, is going to do just a closing ritual for us today. That's another new aspect that we wanted to do as a part of these virtual porches. So Eric, share what you want to, and then Audrey, if you'll lead us in our closing time.
Sure. Well, first, thank you very much, Rachel, for doing this. This is great. Regarding your son and him being an athlete, any kinds of challenges right now? In the news, of course, are those cases where kind of ridiculous challenges, but was wondering about that. And before you answer that question, I also wanted to add that unfortunately, we find that Supreme Court cases that support equal rights don't seem to be enough these days. So the push, and I think Chris Peppel would certainly agree on this, that we also need to get legislative cures for this to go in constitutions and for protections. So back to my question about your son and his athletic pursuits.
Yeah, I totally agree. The political stuff feels like an uphill battle, but we know that ultimately the power rests with the people, right? And they work for us, so let's make it happen. Yeah, so the thing is about this whole trans issue in sports, it's really rooted in misogyny. It's also transphobia, but it's rooted in misogyny. This idea that women are not as strong as men, that women are not as athletic as men, and then this idea that girls, kids who are born and assigned female at birth, are not as strong when they transition to be a boy. And so, and vice versa, right? Kids that are assigned male at birth somehow have some biological advantage. And, you know, there's so much variation in sports. Like if you look at all of the different athletes and all of their bodies at the Olympics, right? And then watch the Paralympics and see how people with all kinds of bodies compete, right? There's no one blanket, like you can't keep people from participating in a sport just because they're a certain gender. And I think, you know, we're just evolving on this. I support women's sports and women having access to sports. I think it's so important for everybody to be able to move their bodies and to compete and to be part of a team and all of the good things that come with that. And also just, I think, you know, when we're talking about kids, it's just ridiculous. Okay, Dennis, yeah, you can talk about it. It's just ridiculous because, you know, kids are at such different levels physically, and there's really not a huge biological difference between, like, you know, boys and girls at that age, there's such variation too in their size and their ability. And so I just think we have to rely on good information. And you know, a friend of mine who's queer started a soccer team for their non-binary kids, just started one, you know, and they started to play other kids. And so I think we have to create our own pathways when they don't exist, because we know that it's so important. And we have to just remind ourselves that this is all really rooted in misogyny, I think, in my opinion. What did you want to say, Dennis?
Well, my son plays football
Mm,
in
your
local,
trans son.
my trans son,
Mhm.
and he's been out since kindergarten.
Mhm.
He is in 6th grade now. He plays on a boys team, and he's a lineman. He's not really big, but he's a great lineman. He's the starting lineman on his team. So, but the league knows, but none of the players know.
Mhm. Mhm.
And they've all been very, very supportive.
Mhm.
So here in Montgomery County, of course, it's Montgomery County, but it's been a very positive experience with sports.
Well, and Dennis and his son testified at the school board too, when they were trying, there's a group, Moms for Liberty, that was trying to change the curriculum to remove LGBTQ books that featured LGBTQ characters at every grade level have been introduced into our curriculum. And it was so inspiring to see Dennis and his son testify and speak to the power of representation. So
he was the inspiring one.
yeah. Well, you too, but okay.
So
So we have a closing from Audrey now.
Okay.
Thank you, Rachel, for being here today and sharing your story. I first read your book, I guess, when it came out in 23, and had a chance to hear you speak a couple of times. And your story has been so inspiring. I have a gender fluid 8th grader who's living in North Carolina, and North Carolina is not quite as open as Washington, but they are brave. And I love the title, Emily, that you, as brave as them. If only we could be as brave as our children are and have to be. But I also think Rachel gave us our marching orders. She told us what we need to do. We need to impact, we need to be informed. We need to find out what's going on. I live in Georgia. I need to find out more about what's going on in my state legislature. I need to inform others. I need to engage. Rachel told us to engage our senators, our legislators, get to know them. I think, Rachel, I think I need to get to know my legislators on a first name basis. And then I need to affirm our children. And I was looking up in the Bible, in the New Living Translation, love is mentioned in the Bible 801 times. I think that's exactly what we're supposed to do. And even when we meet people that may not be as open to LGBTQIA people as we are, what we need to remind people is that we're all about love. And it's not going to be us that changes people's hearts. It's going to be God. And so we can pray that God will change the hearts and minds of people, because that's what we're called to do. And that's to love one another, whatever shape, whatever form, what other identity, whatever culture, just whatever, whomever, we're to love that person. And so I thank you again, Rachel, for being here. I thank those of you who have shared your stories. It gives me great hope for my gender fluid grandchild, that they can find a place where they're accepted and welcomed. And so, Emily, I'm going to close with prayer. Is that okay? I'll pray with me. Gracious Lord, we know that you are in charge. Whatever happens in our lives, you are there, you are in charge. But I do ask that you protect our children and our loved ones and adults and whomever that may not, I don't know, fit the form of what we think they should or whatever, but you will protect them, you will watch over them, and help us, Lord, to love everyone that comes in our path. And may we be strong advocates for those who cannot speak. And it's in Christ's name we pray today. Amen.
Amen. Thank you all for being here. There's several links. I would invite you before you close out, particularly that form to sign up for the PRN email. If you just click on that, it'll be open on your computer. You can fill it out and submit it at a convenient time for you. And just stay tuned to Reconciling emails. We'll continue to advertise about different PRN stuff, but would love for you to begin to sign up for that PRN email. Rachel's book, the link to the publishing company that published it is that's the link that's in there. Love for you to support that publishing house in that way. Yes, it's also on Amazon, but I know that's Rachel's preference. I believe. Is that right, Rachel? Yeah. And then the parent support group toolkit that Rachel mentioned, that's something that this group has put together. It has 5 different tracks that you can do. You can go do them in order, do different ones. It has a lot of resources in there. And we'd love for you to support PRN in that way, RMN in that way, and get access to that, share it with others. We're here for you. Please reach out. Let us know again of different things that you might want us to address, but we're really grateful for who you are and the way that you are a presence in the lives of your loved ones. So go in peace this day, and we'll see you back next month for another virtual porch session. Thank you, everybody, and thanks so much, Rachel.
My pleasure.
Thank
So good to
you.
be with you all.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.